Lisa Roberts. I'm the NDP candidate. How are you?
The NDP's Lisa Roberts has been knocking on doors consistently since last June. She narrowly lost the seat to the Liberals in 2021. Many believed this time it was the NDP's to lose. Lisa Roberts has deep connections to this riding, both as an MLA and former federal candidate, and she's well regarded. But the question here and in many ridings is, how much has the landscape changed in the last few months?
In 2021, I got 40% of the vote against the incumbent member of parliament. So in another election, that might have been enough to win it. It was certainly very close, and I take some credit for that, but also I share that credit with all the, thousands of people who voted for me and the hundreds of people who volunteered in that campaign. And so, yeah, I'm here to try again, and I hope this time successfully become the Member of Parliament for Halifax.
This seat was held by NDP leader Alexa McDonough and then NDP MP Megan Leslie for 18 years. In 2015, the Liberals won a majority, and Andy Fillmore defeated Megan Leslie and took this seat for the Grits.
Whatever I'll be doing, it will always be to work for Halifax.
After 9 years as an MP, Andy Fillmore resigned last fall to run for mayor of Halifax. He won, which left this seat vacant. A by-election wasn't called until many months later. It finally kicked off in early March. Then, when the writ dropped and the federal election was called, the by-election was cancelled. And there were now new boundaries in this Halifax riding as well. So candidates here have already been out campaigning for weeks. Lisa Roberts says she's running because there are issues she's always been passionate about: housing and affordability.
So I was elected provincially in 2016 in a by-election and then re-elected in 2017. And during most of my 5 years in provincial office for the NDP, I served as the housing critic. And I requested that portfolio because I was already concerned at what I could see in my community in terms of people not having a pathway to stay in their community and commit to their community because they were having to chase housing that they could afford. But I talked with a young couple, and she has some disabilities and he works in the cultural sector, and they had been moving every 2 years. Priced out of one place after another, rent-evicted out of one place after another. And they described to me the emotional, just release of tension of moving in here and knowing that there isn't a looming eviction and a looming notice that it's being sold or that it's going to be renovated and they're going to have to leave, and just the feeling that they could actually establish lives in community. So this is the first new co-op building of any size in Halifax since I was first elected as the MLA in this neighborhood. So it's 57 units. It is federal land that went through a lengthy process before it was transferred.
Thank you again so much, and let's do this. Awesome. Hi, I'm Shannon Miedema, and I'm the Liberal candidate for the Halifax riding. Well, we've been door knocking for 3 weeks. We've had a head start here in Halifax with the by-election, and so I've really been focused on listening to what I'm hearing from our residents, and it's not surprising. The number one issue at the door is Trump and tariffs and our economy, affordability, housing supply, affordable housing, healthcare, environment, senior care. Well, housing is a really tricky one because it crosses the jurisdiction of multiple levels of government. Having been a city worker, I know kind of the relationship between municipal level and provincial level, and I know the work that's gone in to actually get a lot of federal funding for housing. So I think the federal government has been really creative and strategic in the way they're funding housing in community.
Housing and affordability are nagging issues in this riding. Rent of the city's most affordable housing has increased 40% in 5 years. Housing stock is old and insufficient for the rampant population growth. Vacancy rates are less than 1%. A few weeks ago, the federal government announced $11.7 million to eco-retrofit 490 homes in Halifax as part of the Canada Greener Affordable Housing Program. But overall, Lisa Roberts says after 10 years, the Liberals haven't delivered on addressing housing issues.
We've had a national housing strategy for, is it 9 years now? Is it 8 years now? And most of the money has gone to private sector builds, which are still really not attainable for most working people. And also because people see the new builds and they know that they can't afford them and they know that their neighbors can't afford them, it also diminishes the social buy-in for new buildings in our community.
Despite those concerns, there is one big issue that has trumped everything else.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still a lot, and some people have even said, I hope we don't forget all the issues that we really need to be thinking about here locally, which I think I'm quite familiar with, on affordability and housing supply and deeply affordable housing. Transportation is another one that I haven't been hearing too much about, but locally it's a really big issue.
Housing is certainly there. Poverty or equity, affordability is a little farther down, but the top issues right now are tariffs and trade. My name is Patrick Sullivan. I'm the president and CEO of the Halifax Chamber of Commerce. Well, we recently did a survey of our members. The Chamber has approximately 2,000 members in the greater Halifax area and spread across the province. They're concerned about tariffs. They're concerned about taxes because many of them are small businesses. And right now they're concerned about defence and sovereignty, as this is one of Canada's largest defence establishments in and around Halifax.
And that's why today I'm announcing my plan to rebuild, reinvest and rearm.
It was wonderful. I was so excited to actually meet Prime Minister Carney. The announcements he was making, I think, are really important, and I think they're going to be really helpful as we navigate these challenging times with Trump and the tariffs. He was talking about reinvesting in our armed forces, in our military families, and ways that he was going to support, and the party was going to support them.
He talked about larger icebreakers, which would be great, give us greater control of this sovereign area in the Arctic. I think that's a positive thing. We expect that they will be made close by. He talked about other areas where they'd want to make an impact as well. In Nova Scotia, and particularly in Halifax, we have an Air Force base. We have the largest naval base in Canada, and all of those folks, thousands of folks are employed at those establishments in this area.
And I think that so far the Liberal Party has been smart to be, talking about these counter tariffs, talking about reducing trade barriers inside of our own country, which I think has been probably a long time coming, and we should really be focused on that. And the goal is by Canada Day to actually have reduced all of those barriers across our country. And then some supports for workers should they lose their job.
People are concerned about their employment as well. So it's been a significant shift in this region in the last little while, as I'm sure it is in many other regions of Canada.
Now, there's also a Conservative candidate in this race, Mark Boudreau. We've reached out to his campaign multiple times, and they've declined all of our requests for an interview. According to the polls, things definitely looked a lot better for the NDP's chances before President Trump started his trade war. Liberals here, like in many places across the country, are in a much better position now than they were in January. They went into this election with momentum.
What I am saying to voters is that we, with our vote here in Halifax, we don't control the whole outcome. We don't control the whole outcome, but we know that when there is a strong NDP presence in Parliament, we make whatever government is formed better. And so in Halifax, we have an opportunity to elect an NDP member of Parliament to be a voice from the East Coast, both in Parliament, but also in the NDP caucus, because so much that was positive in the last 5 years in terms of supports for Canadians would not have happened had the NDP not been there and holding a balance of power.
So I would say from my experience at the doors for the last 3 weeks, a lot of people are thinking about their vote and how it translates to the party that will be in power nationally. And so the conversation for a lot of people is not about the specific candidate in the Halifax riding. It's about who's going to be the leader in Canada to negotiate with Trump.
So what's that done for your chances?
Well, hopefully it's increased them.
In this riding, you know, and in other seats in Nova Scotia, the NDP were doing quite well and expected to win here especially. Yeah. Now that's up. There's a question mark there.
She's very strong. She knows the community well. She's a great advocate for the community. Again, all these issues that I'm talking about, housing, affordability, they all matter, and that's in their wheelhouse, in particular her. But again, it comes down to, I think this time people are going to look at who they're voting for in Ottawa and the Prime Minister, and I think that Jagmeet Singh is lacking that draw, and that's going to hurt Lisa Roberts. But I wouldn't count her out because she's got an amazing ground game here.
And that's our look at the riding of Halifax. Now we're headed to South Shore St. Margaret's. Rick Perkins is the Conservative incumbent for South Shore St. Margaret's. He first ran in 2019, but won the seat in 2021. As of 3 months ago, it looked like this riding would go blue once more.
We're in Gunning Cove, one of the hundreds of small, what are called small craft harbors across Nova Scotia. This is our commercial highway for the fishery. It's where all commercial boats have to come, the safe harbor, unload their catch, refuel, get bait, go out the next day to get their catch. Right now we're in the end stages of the winter lobster fishery in southwest Nova Scotia, which is the richest lobster fishery in the world. We have in my riding, this community, and the one next door, we have about 1,200 licensed boats for lobster with an average of another 3 to 4 people. So we're talking about 8,000 people in this riding that are directly dependent on the lobster fishery, including some of the fish processing plants. And then, of course, that's just one of the many things that you can fish off the South Shore and seafood. We have it all, scallops, halibut, you name it.
Wow. Lobster fishing is part of a $1.3 billion industry in Nova Scotia, and the riding of South Shore St. Margaret's is the home to 2/3 of that industry. So lobster is a pretty important business here.
So I think it's a lot of the poaching that's having an impact.
Oh, 100%. You know that. So.
The biggest issue we faced in the fishery, quite frankly, is the Liberal government's unwillingness to enforce the law. So all fisheries depend on the law being enforced, because without enforcing the law, you have poachers, illegal harvesters. What does that mean and why does that matter? That matters because we have seasons for a reason, that we don't fish when they're breeding.
Perkins is referring to the ongoing conflicts with Indigenous people whose treaty rights entitle them to harvest lobster out of season. These disputes have led to violent confrontations, and Perkins has called for increased enforcements.
They're not enforcing the law because of the claims by First Nations, wrongly, that they have a right to fish whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want, and however much they want. And that's not what the Supreme Court said. The Supreme Court of Canada in the Donald Marshall case said clearly that DFO has a right to infringe on the right to a moderate livelihood for conservation reasons. And everything DFO does by setting limits on the fishery is about ensuring that there are fish species for future generations to fish commercially.
South Shore St. Margaret's is spread over 8,000 square kilometres and is one of the largest ridings in the province. It sits on the edge of Halifax, but is rural at its core. The picturesque towns of Mahone Bay and Lunenburg attract scores of tourists every year. The economy here is diverse, and in addition to tourism, it runs on the fishery, forestry, and manufacturing. The dominant issue that we've heard talking to people here is the U.S. trade war and President Trump's aggressive rhetoric about making Canada a 51st state. Bridgewater is the largest town in the riding, with the majority of services. While Perkins wants to talk about how the Liberals have mishandled the fisheries, the mayor here says the issues on people's minds this election have changed dramatically.
3 months ago was absolutely the number one, was cost of living. Inflation, even though it was coming down, of course we look at the number, it still goes up. So the number's lower, but it's still going up. It's not, inflation isn't, it's not deflation. So cost of living was number one until basically Inauguration Day. And then it just switched like in an instant. Right now it's focused mostly on tariffs and what's happening in the US. We have a large Michelin factory, which is the largest single employer in the region and in the province for one industry. And, there's concerns about the impacts of tariffs on that.
Yeah, like what? Well, like what specifically have you heard that might have the impact?
Yeah, so what happens if, for any company really, but especially Michelin or Fishers, what happens if their product is tariffed and most of those products go to the States? So for our plant here, a significant portion of that product crosses the border. What is the impact? Is there a slowdown? How does that impact not just the employees directly at Michelin, but of course all the indirect employees and the families?
Michelin is the largest private sector employer in this riding. 2,000 people here in Bridgewater work at Michelin. The company recently invested $140 million locally, with an additional $44 million coming from the federal government's Strategic Innovation Fund.
Yeah.
Fancy-Landry, and I'd say the fancy is probably the only fancy thing about me. We're here to roll up our sleeves and just get to work. Hi, I'm Jessica Fancy-Landry, and I am your federal Liberal MP candidate for the upcoming federal election. We're running for South Shore St. Margarets. We are at Vogler's Cove Community Centre, so something about, our good South Shore people, or Nova Scotia, maybe even Atlantic Canada in general, we're all about a good community breakfast. The ballot question, I think right now is with US. Definitely, fortunately, unfortunately, Trump has made this a very polarizing campaign, and I think right now that the Liberal Party has the infrastructure and the experience and knowledge to take that on. It's not a cat and mouse game here. It's a let's sit down and get to work game.
And we're Liberals.
There you go. That's perfect. That's perfect. Thanks so much, Phil. So with that, some affordability and housing issues have popped up. So that is something that is being on the table. Something else in terms of women's rights has been huge, because in Nova Scotia, unfortunately, since October, we've had 7, I think we're up to 8 now, incidences in murder with intimate partner violence. So in this area of the province and in our own riding, 2 or 3 of those have been from women from our area. So myself as an advocate on the board for a Second Story Women's Centre, it's something that we are very concerned about and helping advocate for. So that's been popping up at the doors. In terms of, we talked about the fisheries one, definitely, which is why I made it my very first stop. Once I was acclaimed, our first meet and greet was in Clark's Harbour, because we can't be afraid of that issue. Yeah, so as Prime Minister Mark Carney mentioned this week regarding those fishery issues, he said, we have to bolster our DFO. So that was part of our messaging that he's given us. So it's definitely something that needs to be attended to.
My name is Vincent Boutlier, commercial lobster fisherman in District 33, and I've been doing this for in excess of 40 years now. It's been in my community since I can remember. And my father was foreman at a fish plant, and he did mackerel traps. He actually bought lobsters for the gentleman that he worked for, his great uncle. So I grew up into it. Donald Trump's got to do what Donald Trump's going to do. All right, we just had a 25% tariff put on us by China, and that had to do, I guess, with the government. And I agree with what the government did with that one, because they put it on because to protect the auto industry against the Chinese imports. And I just don't know. In my opinion, Mr. Poilievre would be better suited maybe to deal with Mr. Trump than Mr. Carney. Mr. Carney, I'm worried about Mr. Carney. I know he's a banker.
With the signage you see around here, and you see it on the backs of trucks, whether it be the anti-Trudeau sentiments, that seems to have embedded itself a little more effectively than I would have imagined. And then on the flip side, you have Carney as a leader who I think does inspire some people in terms of how he'll deal with the U.S. I think people do take confidence in his working history, working in economics and trade relations. So I would say all of those things are important. And then obviously on a case-by-case basis, people have individual things that are going to be important to them.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of uncertainty, and I think that's really affecting people on some level. A lot of anxiety, underlying anxiety, and just uncertainty about what the future looks like for everybody is really weighing heavy on people's hearts.
I think it's Canada's future, and we need to be strong, and it's extremely important that people vote. We need a big turnout this time, and we just need to protect our values, our ethics, our social programs, everything.
How has this influenced your ballot choice on the 28th?
I don't want to have somebody who seems to be interested in kind of pandering to a kind of a base and being sort of hyperbolic and really not saying much of anything. It's kind of easy to complain about things, but it's, it'd be nice to have somebody put their money where their mouth was and actually say something that's concrete.
So far, there is no declared NDP candidate here. The 2021 election was quite close, and Conservative Rick Perkins won by about 3%. The riding boundary has since changed, losing some of the bedroom communities of Outer Halifax, where the Liberal base has historically been strongest. But with no NDP candidate on the ballot yet, and all eyes on the national leaders, the Liberals and Conservatives both have a fighting chance in what appears to be a tight two-way battle. But there is one more candidate.
Hi, I'm Mark Embrett. I'm running with the Green Party of Canada in the riding of South Shore, St. Margaret's Bay. I mean, it is really, seems to be more of a two-horse race. But, the Green Party is here for the long term, and I think the more we can get our message out that we're for the people, for the planet, and we're here for a purpose, and we're not here for politics and power.
So what are your chances here for winning?
I think they're wonderful. Right? I have to keep saying, as a first-time candidate, I had been at the beginning say, well, if, and then all of a sudden you see the polling that's coming out, it's turned into a when, right? And I put my package in October, when it might not have been the most popular time, because I believe in that value system that the Liberal Party has.
I think the campaign's going great. I think we're just in the first few days of the campaign. I think we've got the best team and the best platform. I think we've got the best leader. Obviously the issues of the United States tariffs come up and people's views on that. And there's no question that people were angry at the policies and the attitude of Justin Trudeau. And that anger is still there just beneath the surface when you say and understand that the issues that drove them there, the issues that Mark Carney, as the economic advisor to Justin Trudeau, helped develop, the things that have caused the food prices to go up, that have caused 2 million people a week or a month to have to go to food banks in this country, a record level.
In this election, I think it's going to be much more leadership-based than you would think, than typically concerns about your local candidate. I think that's what people are going to care about more, what the person in Ottawa permanently as the Prime Minister is going to be doing, more so than their local candidate. And I think people would like to see the local candidate form government or be part of the party that forms government. And I think that will be part of people's decision. They'll follow polling and be we want to be on the right side of this so we can have a say in how things are done in Ottawa.
For CPAC, I'm Lucy Van Oldenbarneveld.